Lord be with you. Also with you. Let's pray. May the words of my mouth and meditations of all of our hearts be pleasing to you, O Lord, our rock and redeemer. Amen. Good morning.
Good morning.
So first I want to say thank you for welcoming me again. I did come here a year ago, and you did graciously allow me to take time in this pulpit back then, as you do now, to talk about the joy of knowing the good news of Jesus. And specifically, during that visit a year ago, I mentioned that the good news of Jesus is like a graduation from death to life. Moving on from the constant struggle of earning our way in the world to the eternal peace of knowing who we are in God, that we are loved and found worthy in Him. And I want to talk more about the good news of Jesus today, but specifically I want to talk about following Jesus in that good news. The reading from Acts of the Apostles starts with the vision that came to Paul in a dream. It says, a man of Macedonia was standing there, urging him and saying, come over to Macedonia and help us. And when Paul had seen the vision, immediately we sought to go into Macedonia, concluding that God had called us to preach the gospel to them. Before we get into what happens in this passage, what happens in the reading that we have, I think it's important to consider where Paul and his friends were at this point in time and how they got there. In the section just before the reading, Paul and company left the area of Derbe and Lystra, and the scripture says they went through the region of Phrygia and Galatia, having been forbidden by the Holy Spirit to speak the word in Asia. When they had come up to Mysia, they attempted to go to Bithynia, and the Spirit of Jesus did not allow them. So passing by Mysia, they went down to Troas. And I want to put you at ease. I don't expect you to know where all these places are on that. But I do think it's worth noting, after looking at a few maps myself, that this first stretch of the journey does add up to somewhere around 500 miles. So we just covered 500 miles of travel over 2 sentences in the scriptures. So I think maybe we should take a step back and consider what was going on here and why that much distance was covered. And other than helping out with us mapping what the journey was, it is. The first thing that this passage says is they went through the region of Phrygia and Galatia, having been forbidden by the Holy Spirit to speak the word in Asia. And I don't know if you've ever been forbidden from doing something, but in my experience, it usually means it's something that I want to do. Right? I don't have to be forbidden from eating peas, because that's not a danger. Donuts, on the other hand, might be something that I should be forbidden from eating after a certain point. So when we read that the Holy Spirit actually forbade them from speaking the word in Asia, that means we should maybe think that the whole plan to this point had been to go through Asia and to preach the gospel while they were there. But this isn't what ended up happening. They were forbidden from doing it. And I think we can take note of 2 things here. For one, plans can change very quickly. We need to hold loosely onto the plans we make, even if those plans are about sharing Jesus with others. Paul is on a missionary journey, so you'd think that whatever he wants to do should work out, because that's his purpose. But we need to be open that maybe things aren't going to go the way that we hope. The second thing is that we need to let the Holy Spirit guide us. God knows what He's doing. God knows what's right, even if it doesn't make sense to us at the time. We don't know why Paul was forbidden from speaking the word in Asia. But we know that whatever reason it was for, that it was right. It's the right decision because it's a decision that God made. And we also know that because he didn't go through Asia, Paul ended up going through Galatia. And since we do have our Bibles, we know that there was a church that ended up being planted in that area. And we have a letter from Paul to that church in our Bibles, a letter to Galatians. We also know that because we're able to read ahead, 2 chapters later, Paul does actually end up going through Asia. Specifically, he ends up in the city of Ephesus, and he spent years there actually preaching the gospel. But what Paul doesn't know is that any of this is going to happen. All he knows is right now, he isn't able to go through Asia like he planned. We can't understand God's timing, but we know it's right. We know that God has better judgment than we do. Earlier this year, I was shopping for a new computer, and I was comparing a lot of different models. I use my computer mostly for recording things and mixing music, so I wanted to get something that would help me with that. I wanted to get something that would be intuitive, that I can get ideas down quickly and easily. I wouldn't have to work too hard to get stuff in. So I decided that I'd go for a Mac desktop, an iMac. Since it had everything I need built in and I'd be able to use it right out of the box, I wouldn't have to spend time setting it up. So I started saving my money and making plans and even deciding, okay, this is when I'm going to make the trip. This is how I'm going to pay for it. I even make sure that after that date of purchase, I freed up a week of my schedule just so that I knew I'd have extra time to figure it out, to play with it, and have that time set aside. Then I got to the store. I told the salesman person what I wanted. I said, these are the specs that I need. This is everything. And as we were talking, he brought up that they actually just announced recently that a newer, better model of what I was looking for was being released 2 weeks later. So I had set out with a certain plan of what I wanted, and it turns out that there was actually something better available, but I had to wait an extra 2 weeks. Even though I knew that a better thing was coming, and to be clear, this was my choice to wait, at that time I was actually kind of frustrated. I knew things were going to get busy after the time that I had set aside, and I had a timeline in place for when I wanted to get things done, that after 2 weeks of not being able to do those things, I just wouldn't have the time for it. I wouldn't be able to accomplish the things that I'd hoped for by the time that I wanted them done. Now, I could have still made the decision to get the lesser option, to get the old model, but I opted to wait, knowing that in the long term, it would actually be better for me and for what I wanted to do, to wait. Unlike me, Paul didn't have the benefit of knowing what was coming next. He only knew that his plans were not going to work out the way that he thought. Paul had a plan of how he wanted to see God's work done. He had an idea for what it would be like and planned his whole trip around it. Then God said no. When God says no, we don't have the benefit of knowing why, or even what might happen instead. All we know is that God knows. And all we know is that God has a better understanding of what is right and what is the right thing to do. Rather than pass through Asia preaching the gospel, Paul took a 500-mile trip around that area because now was not the time. And as I mentioned, we know now that the trip probably helped establish the church in Galatia. And we know that he did end up preaching the gospel in Asia later. But at the time, all Paul knew is that he was forbidden from doing what he wanted. Likewise, our reading says, when they had come up to Mysia, they attempted to go into Bithynia, but the Spirit of Jesus did not allow them. So not only were the original plans thrown off, but now they tried to make a new plan to make up for it, and that one was turned down. And unlike Asia, we don't actually have a record of Paul ever visiting Bithynia in Acts. The reason I bring all this up is because before we read the passage from today about the gospel being preached, we need to put ourselves in the place of Paul when these things happen. So going back into where our reading starts, it says, a vision appeared to Paul in the night. A man of Macedonia was standing there, urging him and saying, come over to Macedonia and help us. If we start the reading here, we only see how God moved to do what Paul wanted to do. We only see God saying yes to his mission, and Paul's willingness name. We only see the fruits of Paul's final yes to the Spirit, but not the full work of obedience in following God's nose for 500 miles along the way. We live in a social media culture with Facebook and Twitter and Instagram where all we get are a bunch of snapshots of people's lives that don't tell the full story. And while we know it's true that these snapshots don't tell the full story, we don't always live like it. I know that all of my friends posting on social media are sharing everything, but I can't help but feel envy, but feel jealousy and feel frustration when I look at their lives and assume they're so much better than mine, because I only see the good news. When I see perfect families and great friends, amazing jobs and fulfilled passions, when it looks like everyone else is achieving their goals, I turn back to myself and I ask why I haven't done the same thing. When we only read the successes in ministry and only see the great works of mission, we can be discouraged by our own failings. We can convince ourselves that the long line of no's that we've received in our lives will never end. And the culture of social media didn't start with the internet. It didn't start with Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. These platforms are just mirrors of who we are. It's been our culture as long as we've been following. We've always put our best face forward, and we've always hidden our struggles. Even in our reading, we're rushed in 2 sentences through the 500 miles of what would feel at the time like inaction by Paul and his friends, who couldn't do the great things that they wanted to do. They couldn't do the mission they'd set out for. But then, we're given a detailed image of the vision, of the purpose, of God working miraculously through his chosen people for his kingdom. When we hear eloquent preachers, when we watch joyful givers, when we experience gracious hosts or witness effective evangelists, we aren't seeing the whole picture. We're only getting a snapshot of the life that's lived in Christ. We only see the one yes, but we don't see the series of other yeses and nos which led to that point. We don't see the 500-mile detours and disappointments along the way. After the long trek around Asia, Paul was eager for a yes from God. Paul had his vision of the man from Macedonia. And our reading continues. We immediately sought to go into Macedonia, concluding that God had called us to preach the gospel to them. So I'm excited that Luke is the one who wrote the book of Acts, and he's actually with Paul at this time. And that's why we see we and us and reading. After the roundabout way they had to go in order to avoid the places they were forbidden to preach, you can hear the excitement in Luke's writing, knowing that he's there with them. They were still on the other side of the Aegean Sea from Macedonia, but Luke outlines the rest of their journey. Setting sail from Troas, he made a direct voyage to Samothrace, and the following day to Neapolis, from there to Philippi, which is the leading city of the district of Macedonia and a Roman colony. Listen to the words. They took a direct voyage, and on the following day continued on their way. They finally knew where God was leading them, and they couldn't wait to get there. But as soon as they got there, Luke writes, we remained in this city some days. Even after the call was made clear, and when they arrived as quickly as they could to the city, it still took a number of days before that call was realized. This is another yes they had to make. They had to say yes to the patience of God and to trust the call that they received. This is where they were meant to be, even if they couldn't see it yet. They went to where they thought was a place of prayer and spoke to some women who had gathered there. The scripture says, one who heard us was a woman named Lydia from the city of Thyatira, a seller of purple goods who was a worshiper of God. The Lord opened her heart to pay attention to what was said by Paul, And after she was baptized and her household as well, she urged us, saying, "If you have judged me to be faithful to the Lord, come to my house and stay." And she prevailed upon us. If Luke had an Instagram in the first century, this is the picture that we see, right? It's a woman merchant who came to faith in God because Paul preached in Macedonia along the way, because God led them there, because God told them that that's what they had to do. And then this woman invited the group to stay at her house, and they're staying there. But having read the rest of the passage, we at least have an idea of all the steps it took to get there. That's 500 miles worth of steps. And you might not have caught it, but Lydia is from a city of Thyatira, which is located in the heart of Asia Minor, the very place that Paul and his friends wanted to preach in the first place. They were forbidden from going to Asia to share the word, but they still shared it in Macedonia to a woman who was from Asia. Most of the time, following Jesus looks like the 500 miles than it does like the visions and conversions. But part of the walk is being okay with God saying no, and always ready for God to say yes. God's plans are greater than our plans. And if we're willing to listen, and if we can be honest with ourselves and with God about our joys and frustrations, about our hopes and disappointments, then God has a place for us and his purposes to do the work he's given us to do. But we need to trust that God knows what's right and that he knows what's good. We need to trust that God cares more for us than we often realize. And we can't look to the lives of others to judge ourselves or our successes. God is with us in the 500 miles. He's with us when our plans fall through. God is with us even when it feels like he's not. We need to continue turning to him, looking for his guidance, and trusting that his purposes are greater than our plans. Amen.